Alright, so let me educate y'all. Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna teach you some psychology, because that's what I've been doing all day. Teaching myself psychology stuff. Alright, biological perspective, the question is explain one study related to localization of function in the brain. To answer this, you would reference Paul Broca 1961 study found that that people with Broca's aphasia, named after Paul Broca during a study, which is a mental problem in the left frontal lobe, would have problems trying to understand and make grammatically correct or complex sentences, basically speaking, right? And to support this, he did a study on this man named Tan. And he's named that because he can only say the word Tan. After Tan passed away, a post-mortem experiment was done on Tan, an autopsy basically, to see what was happening in his brain. And what was found out was that there was a severe problem with the lower left frontal lobe. Therefore, that area is now known as Broca's area, and that whole problem is now known as Broca's aphasia. Almost a decade later, in 1874, Carl Wernicke conducted similar experiments on different people that seemed to have this exact problem, where they would have speech impediment or speech, because they could not understand or form sentences. But the thing about Wernicke's was that he found that his patients could produce speech but could not understand. And when they produced speech, it wasn't super grammatically complex, similar to Broca. And the area, Wernicke's area, is located in the brain, obviously, but it is, let's see, here, I'm just getting this. The condition is known as Wernicke's aphasia, and it is in the left posterior superior temporal gyrus. Wow. And again, by carrying out post-mortem studies, he found the Wernicke's area, similar to how the Broca's area was discovered. Anyway, those are the things that you want to mention. Now, using one or more examples, explain the effect of neurotransmission on human behavior. Katsumatsu and Hirai, 1999, studied the serotonin levels in Buddhist monks that journeyed on a 72-hour pilgrimage into mountains. And what was found was that the serotonin levels before, during, and after had changed drastically in these monks during the trip, causing them to see hallucinations, to act bizarrely, etc., etc. And the blood samples were taken before, during, and after, and during would be when the monks would exhibit these behaviors, and they were compared to before and after, and the results were shown. Apparently the serotonin levels had been increased massively and had affected the hypothalamus, if I am not mistaken. I will just check. Yes, hypothalamus. And this affects their mood, their hunger, sleep, arousal, etc., etc. And I'm still sick. The second study that would be referenced example would be Wallace, 1970. He studied the effects of oxygen intake and carbon dioxide being expelled or eliminated from the body, and what was found that in meditation, and what was found was that people that meditated had lower levels of oxygen intake and carbon dioxide elimination, because their body was much more calm. This is because acetylcholine isn't released as much, and this caused the heart rate to drop, blood pressure to drop, respiration rate to drop, etc., etc. and there was muscle relaxation. However, due to a lack of acetylcholine, it can cause muscle spasms and cramps and cause the muscle to contract due to that lack of acetylcholine. And yes, that's the second effect of neurotransmission on human behavior. Moving on really quickly. Okay. Next question. Discuss effects of the environment on the physiological process. Okay. What you're going to do is reference Rosenweig and Bennett, 1972, where they studied 3 different groups of rats. These rats were placed in different environments. One was considered a quote-unquote Disneyland for rats. The second was a standard rat cage sort of environment, and the other one was an isolated rat in a small cold thingy with like no food or water. Well, very little. Standard had appropriate food and water for the amount of rats that were in there, and then the Disneyland had a whole bunch of rats, and they had more than enough water, more than enough space. They had like toys and stuff as well. And basically, after I want to say 4 to 10 weeks, all the rats were killed, and then autopsies were performed on all of these rats, and it was found that the rats, the only real difference was between the Disneyland rats and the isolated forever alone rat, where basically the results were that the cerebral cortex, because it's much more it becomes stimulated more and becomes enriched more by more interaction, social interaction, more rats. Basically, more rats equals bigger cerebral cortex / thinking / everything, and it benefited it, all the rats in there, while the small, independent, puny, tiny, alone, sad, cold rat was like derping out, basically. And there was greater activity of the nervous enzyme acetylcholine sterase. I can't actually pronounce that word, that's why I had to look at it. Anyway, and it was found in the brain tissue of the enriched rats. Critical thinking was also increased in the enriched rats. Problem solving, even some sort of social attitude towards other rats was shown. Also, the ratio of RNA to DNA was much larger in the enriched rats environment and to all the enriched rats rather than the alone rat. And the synapses of the enriched rats' brains were 50% larger than those of the deprived rats. That's the study that you're going to want to reference for that. Okay. How much time? I'm going to check really quickly. Okay, 8 minutes. Wow, that's a lot of psychology. I'll do one more study. Examine one interaction between cognition and physiology in terms of behavior. Okay. One interaction. So you're going to want to reference Oliver Sacks. To see and not to see. It was a column that was in a New York Vintage magazine or something, I want to say it is, and that was published in 1995. However, the study was actually gone on since 1991, when basically Oliver Sacks met this man named Virgil. Yes, Victor. No, his name is Virgil, and he was about to be married to Amy, one of Oliver Sacks' friend's daughters. Some details aren't super important, really, but the thing is, Virgil had a problem with his eye. He was partially blind. He had a cataracts around on his eye, and basically he was blind except for the fact that he could see like shadows move in front of his eye. For example, if I like blurred this out, and you would be able to see like the shadow of my hand moving across the camera. Except I'm not going to blur you out. Basically, they just come up with this idea and this project thing where they would sort of like shoot a laser into his eye, and correct his eyes. It's like basically laser eye corrective surgery stuff, right? And they were like, okay, let's do it. And Amy and Virgil, okay, let's do it. And that way Virgil can see his marriage and everything and be like, awesome. Okay, so the surgery happened as planned. Everything went well. People were in tears because it was like a success and awesomeness. But the thing is, Virgil could see, but he couldn't see. For example, if he could see this wallet, he would see this wallet, but he wouldn't know that this was a wallet because he hadn't grown up becoming used to all the things that we see. For example, look around my house. You can see chair, table, fan, rug, floor, lights, painting, etc., right? He wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. Basically, his mind couldn't even put things together. For example, he saw a tree, and he said it's not like anything he's ever seen from this planet because he couldn't put together the fact that the tree was made up of branches and leaves. He saw them as two separate things. Same thing with faces and people, etc., etc. And you can look into that some more, and that's basically the one study that you actually really need to talk about because it's only examined one interaction between cognition, which is the critical thinking of the analyzing chair and associating with chair in your mind, and physiology, which is basically mental, physical stuff. Alright, I studied a lot more than that, but I just want to get that out on camera because that's kind of what's going on in my mind right now. I'm just going over and over these things. It's like running laps. As Michael Scott from The Office would say, my mind is going a mile a minute. An hour. I'm going much faster than Michael Scott. Anyway, I'm so tired. Alright, good night.